Hey everyone, welcome to another deep dive. This time we're tackling the role of social work lecturer. And let me tell you, the RoleCatcher files for this one are packed.
Definitely intriguing. I'm excited to dig into this.
Right. I mean, first things first, this isn't your average teaching gig. You're teaching A&D practicing social work, which is pretty unique, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. It stood out to me in the RoleCatcher guide, too. They called it Shaping the Future of the Profession, which I thought was a really cool way to put it. You're training the next wave of social workers, but you're also actively working with people.
Yeah, so it's like hands-on from both sides. You could be teaching a class in the morning, and then what, leading a group therapy session in the afternoon. Something like that.
It's possible. It might be therapy or counseling within the university setting or even advocacy work. The cool thing is it's way more real world than a lot of academic roles.
I bet. And speaking of real world, the scope here is huge, EE. The guide talks about working with individuals, with families, even entire communities, all sorts of challenges too. So we're talking hospitals, schools, community centers, talk about variety.
It's definitely not a desk job. It'd be a great fit for someone who loves connecting with people from all different backgrounds and situations.
For sure. But, and RoleCatcher doesn't shy away from this, it could be tough emotionally. We're talking potentially traumatic situations you might encounter.
That's social work, though, right? No matter where you are, it's emotionally demanding. But I think the key is being prepared for it. That's where self-care and strong coping mechanisms are so important.
100%. The guide really emphasizes that building resilience, knowing yourself. That's just as important as any textbook.
Absolutely. And on the topic of important things, the guide talks about how technology is changing social work, which I thought was really interesting.
Oh, for sure. Like I'm thinking video conferencing, electronic health records, that kind of thing, right? Which isn't something you'd immediately think of.
Exactly. It's becoming more and more crucial, even though social work is so often about face-to-face interaction.
So true. Can you imagine being a lecturer who's not just comfortable with that tech, but actually teaching students how to use it effectively?
That's huge. You'd be preparing them for the reality of the field, for sure.
Okay, so we've got to talk about the elephant in the room, the pros and cons. I mean, it's all well and good to get excited about a career, but got to be realistic too, right?
Definitely. And I think the guide does a good job of that, presenting both sides. So on the one hand, you've got the whole making a real difference in people's lives thing, which is, let's be honest, a big draw for a lot of folks.
Right, being a voice for social justice, advocating for people, that's powerful stuff.
It is. And the career paths are so diverse, too, which is another big plus. But then, yeah, there's the other side, the potential for burnout, the fact that it can be emotionally draining. And of course, there's always bureaucracy to deal with.
Yeah, no sugarcoating there.
Yeah.
But the guide talks a lot about self-care and preventing burnout, so that's good. Finding that balance between passion and sustainability, I guess.
Exactly. And finding your niche, like zeroing in on the areas within social work that really light you up.
I like that passion meets sustainability. Okay, let's get into the nitty-gritty for a sec. The education stuff, education levels, academic pathways, all that. This RoleCatcher guide is a goldmine.
Totally agree. They really lay it all out there. It's interesting, too, because the degrees that can lead to this role, they're not always what you'd expect.
Right, you've got the usual suspects like social work, psychology, sociology, obviously. But then it also mentions things like, get this, political science. So it's not always a straight line, which I think is kind of cool.
I agree. It shows it's more about the core skills you bring to the table, not just the specific field of study. Which, speaking of skills, the functions and core abilities section goes deep.
Seriously.
Yeah.
It's not enough to just learn the stuff. It's about how you actually apply it.
Yeah.
Like active listening, critical thinking, being able to communicate clearly. That's essential for any teacher, but especially in social work.
Right. You got it. Anyone can lecture on theories, but actually connecting that to real-life situations, that's the art of it.
And that's what's so cool about you being here. You've actually lived these experiences. It's not just theoretical. It's your story.
I appreciate that. You know, I remember when I first started out as a lecturer, fresh out of grad school.
I bet that was a whirlwind.
Yeah.
Like you've aced all the exams, you know your stuff, but then you're actually in the classroom. Totally different.
Oh, for sure. It's one thing to have the knowledge, but then connecting that to real-life scenarios, that's what really clicked for my student.
Yeah, it's like the textbook comes alive when they can see how it applies to their own lives. And speaking of real-life experience, the RoleCatcher guide is big on hands-on learning, internships, field placements, even just volunteering. They really stress that.
Which makes sense. You learn so much by actually doing it, you know? It's not just the practical skills either. It's also getting those insights you just wouldn't get from a book.
So true. Plus, let's be real, having that on your resume, it makes a difference.
Absolutely. It shows you're not all talk, you've been in the trenches.
Right. Like you get it.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so another thing that caught my eye is certifications. Specifically, the guide mentions the LCSW.
Yeah, the licensed clinical social worker credential. That's a big one. You got to do extra coursework, supervise clinical hours, pass a whole exam.
It's a commitment, for sure, but it shows a certain level of expertise. What do you say?
Absolutely. And it can open doors. Like you might be able to teach more advanced courses, supervise students in clinical settings, even think about private practice.
Wow, see, now that's interesting. You know, what I love about RoleCatcher is how they lay out these career trajectories.
Huh.
It's like peeking into the future of your career. Kind of cool.
I know, right? That social work lecture, career stages section is super
Mm.
helpful. They break down the typical path from entry level all the way to senior positions.
Okay, so walk me through it. What can someone starting out expect to be doing?
Well, you might start as a junior lecturer, maybe assisting senior faculty, leading some discussions, and then gradually you take on more like designing your own courses.
So it's a good chance to learn the ropes, get some mentorship.
Yeah. And as you gain experience, you might move into a senior lecturer role, which often means leading research, mentoring other faculty, maybe even chairing committees. It gets pretty high level.
So it becomes about more than just teaching. You're shaping the field itself.
Totally. You become a thought leader,
Mm.
an advocate, a mentor. It's pretty amazing, actually.
Okay, I got to talk about the interview prep on RoleCatcher because they have 120,000 interview questions. Seriously, 120,000.
It's wild, right? And they're all tailored to specific roles, so you're not getting generic advice. It's all super relevant.
I'd say. It's like having a cheat sheet for your career. Oh, and then they have this AI tool, RoleCatcher Copilot AI. It gives you feedback on your answers.
Having a virtual career coach in your pocket, that's the future.
I know, right? It's incredible. So we've covered a lot here. We talked about the teaching A&D, the practice, the emotional challenges, but also how rewarding it can be. We talked education, tech, even career paths.
It's a lot to process,
Mm.
but hopefully it's giving you a clearer picture of what this career could look like.
Absolutely. And honestly, RoleCatcher seems to have thought of everything. They really set you up for success. But, you know, beyond all the practical stuff, there's something else we need to talk about, something that's maybe even more important.
Oh, I'm all ears. What are you thinking?
It's the why, right? Like we've talked a ton about the education, the skills, all that. But at the end of the day, the why is huge.
Couldn't agree more. It's what keeps you going, especially when things get tough. And it makes it all so much more meaningful.
100%. So for anyone listening who's thinking about this career path, really think about what excites you within social work. Like, is there a specific group of people you feel drawn to? Maybe kids, veterans, folks experiencing homelessness?
It's about finding that sweet spot where your passions and skills align, and not just who you want to work with, but the kind of impact you want to have on the whole field.
Exactly. So are you all about policy change, creating new therapies, maybe mentoring the next generation of social workers? There are so many ways to make a difference as a social work lecturer.
It's like, what's your legacy going to be? What mark do you want to leave?
Ooh, I like that. And those questions, they don't just go away. They're going to keep coming up throughout your career.
Exactly. That's what keeps it fresh, you know? Reminds you why you're doing it.
So well said. Okay, I think we've covered a ton of ground here. RoleCatcher really gives you the inside scoop on becoming a social work lecturer.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it comes down to you.
Absolutely. It's your journey.
So to wrap things up, if this is calling you, dive into those RoleCatcher files, explore everything, but most importantly, take some time to really sit with your why. What kind of impact do you want to have on the world? It's a big question, but it's worth asking.
Couldn't agree more. That why is going to be your guide.
It really is. All right, everyone, that's a wrap on this deep dive. Hopefully you feel as inspired as I do. Until next time, keep asking those big questions, keep learning, and keep exploring.